All right, everybody, this is Norm back at you again. Previous Commodore, many moons ago. This is take two to catch up on the part that Mr. Bain did not get the first time. So we're going to go around the course again. So in the beginning, we started with 4 boats. And the club was back in those days called Brigadoon.
Close that door. Oh, much better.
Brigadoon.
Brigadoon.
And those 4 boats that started the club were Old Yeller, which were Lloyd and Muriel Berquist, Dragon's Blood, Bill and Sylvia Mueller, Windermere, Karen and Bill Eklund, and Karma, Jim and Gretchen Fickstadt. They called it Brigadoon. So back in that day, we experienced exponential growth. I think in 1984, when I look back at the roster, there were 37 boats. That was day one of the club, 37 boats. Most of our activity in the marina which was at White Bear Docking. And by 1987, we had almost 60 boats in the club. So like I said, we just kept growing and growing and growing. We named our races back in those days as well. I don't know if it was the intention of the founding members to be different, or if they just thought it was a fun thing to do, but we actually named our races. One of the races was known as the Bent Nail, and of course the Bent Nail is the result of 2 of our founding members racing, breaking the main sheet off of the Traveler and using a nail to fix it. The Bent Nail Regatta was born. Another race that we did, which was quite memorable, was the Mayhem Race. And the way we started the Mayhem Race with 60 boats was we'd have every boat have a designated runner. That designated runner would go up to tallies and a horn would blow, and they would then have to run to their boat, which was not yet started. The skipper would start the motor, push off, and motor to the starting line of a course that we set on the lake. Imagine the mayhem that occurs not only when you have people running down the docks to their boats, but you have multiple boats trying to get out of the harbor at the same time. I don't think that many of those motors saw RPMs quite as high as on the Mayhem Race. So that was fun. So they go out and they do their racing around the course. The most benign part of it, of course, is the sailing. Once they get back to the finish line, down come the sails, crank up the motor again, race back to the docks, tie up, send your runner up to tallies to capture the flag. The person who captures the flag first is the winner of the Mayhem Regatta. Now naturally, there were all kinds of shenanigans that occurred during the Mayhem Race. There were kidnappings, there were tie-ups, there was even this eventual little, oops, just tripped you along the way kind of thing. In the end, we kind of figured out maybe it's not such a good idea, or setting a good example for our younglings to be running up and down the docks as we did. Another fun thing that we did was night racing. Part of the requirements of night racing was you had to have a flashlight on your boat, you had to wear a life jacket, and we raced around the course starting at 10 p.m. at night. So we actually built markers that were about 4 feet tall. The top half of them were very bright fluorescent red, and we actually screwed in a light of some sort on the top that's run by batteries, so that at 10 p.m. at night, the boats going around the course could find their marks. Now, on a couple of occasions, those batteries went dead. The flashlights come in pretty handy. But in the end, the sheriff kind of put the kibosh on our night racing. I'm guessing because there were also a lot of fishermen on the lake during that period of time, and we may have just scared them a little bit. So that was the end of that. Now we're caught up.
We're caught up now? Wow. Well, thank you so much. I really messed up when I didn't start taking it right away, but like I say, it's not my tech.
The strip club memories came back.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this and to do this thing for us anyhow, because you're, one of the founding fathers of the club, and you're one of the last remaining founding fathers. Bear in mind that at the time that the club started, 2 of the boats that you named were PY23s.
Yeah.
So that's that's why I bought one. Windermere was a PY23. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Norm.
The committee vote that they're a spinnaker boat, they're a non-spinnaker boat. Something that we did and failed fast at was golf scoring. So with the golf scoring, we decided that, we're at a point where it became very clear that we had some very consistent racers in our club. The same people were beginning to win over and over again. The trophy table went to the same number of votes, right? And you could predict how that looked like. So we came up with this scheme called golf rating, where if you consistently were doing not as well, we would boost up your handicap. And if you were doing really, really well, we would reduce your handicap even more. And, we did it, but it became just kind of one of these chores, really hard to manage, and we said, kill it, it's done. But we did have fun. Winches race. 87 was the first time we did that winches race. And this was driven by a number of women who said, we can do this. And of course, we thought this was a great idea. And we did that. So we established the winches race. And I don't know if there were a couple skippers out there who were just reluctant to let go of the tiller, or if they enjoyed dressing and dragging. But it did happen.
We were a very open-minded club.
We are inclusive. And we let that happen once. But beyond that, it was all women all the time. That drew a little bit of attention. As we march forward in time a little bit, I think it was right around 88 where I call it the Grand Migration. This is the drought years. And so again, remember, we were all down in White Bear Docking, and the lake went down real severely. I had just purchased this brand new boat that had a pretty deep rudder on it. And I remember that just to get in and out of my dock, I had to raise that rudder up about 3 feet. And that still didn't help because my wing keel dug into the mud underneath of me. So I call it the Great Migration because I think right around that time, that's when this started populating. The new docks came in, and we said, yeah, there's a good idea. Maybe we'll move over. So a lot of the boats finally did move over to what was then called Johnson Boat Works. There you go. Which obviously became White Bear Boat Works over time. One of the things that really sticks out in my mind is the fun that we have as a club as well, especially over the 4th of July. We would literally empty the entire marina and do fun things. One of the things that we did was at around 6 o'clock, we would empty the marina and charge down to Ramsey Beach, tie up, and watch the fireworks. Well, 6 o'clock till about 10 o'clock is a long time, so you can make up whatever you want what we did in between. But it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. And then also, another thing that happened was we started to establish these parties on the peninsula. The Tyndalls were on, what direction is that? North. They were on the north side of the peninsula. And so a couple years, the Tyndalls would throw this party. And all the boats would motor over there. We'd throw our hooks out right in front of the Tyndalls, and they'd have this little dinghy to come and get us. And we'd have a party over there. Soon after that, I think the Tyndalls moved, and Larry decided, I can do this. And so we had parties over at the Klops on the other side of the peninsula. which I think still goes on to this day. And so those are very solid memories for me, and so much fun because of the camaraderie they built. The Ordway race is another thing that sticks out in my mind. So some of us in the club would also do the Ordway race, which is the race that's on the 4th of July. And I remember about the time when I had just purchased my F-27 and had it down here, and I was going to race that in the Ordway race. And Skip caught me on the way to the bathroom or something like that and said, "Can I race with you today?" I said, "Sure, why not?" So Skip was going to race the Ordway race on Corsair F-27. He said, "Can I bring some friends?" I said, "I don't care." So comes time to leave the dock. Here comes Skip and about 8 of his best friends. And I think the 8 of his best friends have already been celebrating since the night before. So here we go, and we're going out in the lake, and we're racing, and everybody's having a good time laying on the nets and what have you, and enjoying the beautiful windy day that it was. And so Skip sailed a fine race, as you would expect him to do, right? It's like he's just a great sailor, and he did really well in this race. I remember right around at the end of the race, we were heading back to the marina, and it was a broad reach. We were on a port tack. I had my screecher out, which is a really big sail, and we were heading towards the rocks. You know where the rocks are over here, right? And I looked down at the speedo, and it's reading 18, 18.6, 19, and I'm going, okay, we got to do something here soon because the lake's getting small. Skip says, "I have to go pee. Here's the tiller." And so I'm going, okay, Skip. So Skip is doing his business out the back of the boat, and I've got the tiller, and the rocks are approaching very quickly. And so I remember myself going, these other 8 people on board are not a lot of help because they were still having their fun. So we pull in the screecher, we go through the jibe. I slow us down to about 12 knots coming into the marina area. And Skip's going, "Thank you. I'm good. I'm done." But for me, it's like, oh my gosh. Thanks for all your help, Cal. We tried a lot of different things. We tried small boat racing as well. I know a lot of you know Ernie Eisenberg. I remember one year he bought, just for fun, well, Ernie's bought a lot of boats just for fun. I think Ernie's up to like 40 boats now or something like that. But he bought these 2 boats called Twitchels or something like that. And we had, right out in front of the marina here, little match racing. Let me rephrase that. Grudge match racing. Because you could actually sign up who you wanted to race against. And people promptly did that. It was a big hit. People signed up to race each other. We had a couple on the lake, Mark and Mary Hittner. Anybody remember them?
Sure.
Hittners? And so Mary signed up to race Mark. I think Mary won, if I'm not mistaken. But we had a lot of fun with that race as well because you got to finally race against your nemesis and either show them how it's done or walk away. Another thing that's really been a lot of fun and a lot of memories for us as part of our heritage in BBYRA is traveling up north. I recall the early days. I think my first time was like, 87, 86, 87, where a convoy of us would go up to the Leech Lake Regatta. Leech Lake is a place where I'm at right now, and we have had this regatta. This will be the 53rd running of it. But a few of us sailors here, I think Cat's Meow, Obsession, my boat, and Ernie's boat were some of the first ones that went up to Leech Lake to race up there. And we were just enamored with the size of the lake and the waves and everything else. And we did point-to-point racing where we would launch at Cochrane's Marina and then sail around to some resort, spend the night, the next day sail to another resort. And just get out on the lake, and it was something very new for us. Little did we know that our little 22 and 23 foot boats weren't necessarily always built for that kind of water as well. There's some big bad waves on that lake. My first or second year doing it, broke my rudder. Charlie Barlow had a Cape Dory typhoon. He broke his rudder and we had to peel him off the rocks. But nevertheless, we always had 6 or 7 boats from BBYRA make that trek up. And then on Monday night when it's over, pack things up and get back here in time for the Tuesday night race. It's just that kind of dedication towards racing, which was really, really fun. By the way, you're all invited. Come on up. It's a fun time. It's a fun time. I want to kind of wrap things up and talk a little bit about handicapping. As with any sailing association, handicapping has become kind of a centerpiece of attention, and I did a lot of the handicapping back in the days. I remember sitting at tallies with my laptop, which looked about like this, and calculating results and printing them off as we're sitting at tallies, and people hovering over you. Did you put that in right? Did you put that in right? Had I known better, I would have just said, "Can you get me a beer? Can you get me a beer?" Anyway, so how do we do this? I'm going to give you some insight to it. It started early in spring, February or earlier. It would be like Norm, Tim Reiner, Ron Nelson. We'd meet in one of our basements, and we would use these tools. We had, you're going to love this, the perfect one. This one happens to be from 1988. Data here. This was club property, by the way. I just found this in one of my closets, and I think it now belongs to all of y'all. We had that. Oh, and I have this beautiful binder. And some of the artifacts are up here. But we would have data sheets for every one of the boats where we've handwritten in things like boat dimensions, their I, their E, their P, their J. Anybody know what that is? Anybody care? What the ballast is, what's their displacement, what's their sail area, what's their length of the water line. And we would come up with all these conversations and try to calculate what their handicap is. And we put supporting comments and descriptions in here as well, which I think if you actually took a look at this stuff, you'd be quite amused. So, we had the data sheet for each book. The other thing I want to share, we use spreadsheets a lot. I mean, spreadsheets were an integral part of our handicapping. Yep. I feel like a caveman. But this was before Lotus 1, 2, 3, for gosh.
How many bolts are on there, Norm, on this?
On this thing, a lot. My spreadsheet doesn't have numbers down the side.
Oh, okay.
But I would guess a lot.
That looks like that's like 50 or so.
Oh, for sure. A lot of that. So we have that. The per handicap book, the spreadsheet, and then of course some other things that I think are really cool and key are right?
You still have to drive?
What's that?
You still have to drive?
Yeah. So, no, I don't have it. But as I look at this, it's like 1995 materials, handicapping materials. 1996 handicapping material, 1997 handicapping material.
Just
Good
in case
gracious.
I would look at my September.
Good luck with all that stuff, right? One of the things I wanted to share with you though is, just to give you a little insight on some of the deep brainchild that went on when we did our handicapping. So some of the supporting comments and justification. And one of the boats that we always had trouble with was this thing called the O'Day Mariner. Anybody remember the O'Day Mariner?
Yeah.
That was Hitler's boat.
That's Hittner's boat, exactly. Just to let you know, in 1992, they started out with a 284 as their handicap. Pretty high. By 1996, we've knocked them down to 245, baby. Yep. And so, like I said, we have all this documentation. We ran all kinds of different scenarios, comparing boats to different boats in the fleet. It's like, this is a treasure trove of comedy. We've got all the different brochures in here about the boats that we raced back then. There might even be a wavelength brochure in here. On that.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is. So that's really kind of cool and really fun. Oh yeah, so this is an example of what a filled out sheet looks like. And again, I mean, we actually, that has to be three or four beers right there. It has to be. We also had protests. Yes, we did. Sadly, but they were necessary, right? And we had forums and we had committees to do the protesting. I've been involved in a couple of altercations. One thing that there's a common theme through both of my altercations, and her name's Lorraine. One time she was my nemesis on a different boat, and the other time she's crew for me. But nevertheless, so Doogie and I were racing the 235, the Veneto, and it was a pretty blustery day, I think. It was one of those days where it was loud, you couldn't hear anything, and Jim and I were sailing on a port tack. You have to sail on a port tack every now and then. And I think Mike Facius, who was on a Precision 23 at that point in time, they may have yelled at us. I don't think they ever did, though, Jim.
They did tell me that they didn't because they thought, oh, Norm and Jim will see us.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, it was a T-bone. It was a T-bone, and not only was it a T-bone, it was a dismasting T-bone.
Oh boy. Oh, I remember on the race course, it's like, oh my God, because here's the top third of the sail. Just like drew a score line and.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Jim and I were trying to fish our mast and sails out of the lake, and then we finally got towed back or something like that. But excuse me, it was a colossal mess. My wife wasn't all too happy with that, as you can imagine. But that again was a situation where we got the boat out of the water, we got the insurance in there to take a look at it. Eric spent the rest of his life underneath the boat fixing the thing. Hoopers did some of it too. But that thing came out better than it went in, right? That was the beauty of it. That thing was just beautiful when we got done work on it. You rigged the new mast for me too.
And that would have been Johnny.
Johnny did that?
Yeah.
The mast was re-rigged, everything was just built really well. The other Lorraine incident was up at Leech Lake, where she was crew for me. Oh, why Lorraine? Lorraine was on Facius's boat. That's the link there. But she was on my Corsair up at Leech Lake, and again, it was one of those situations where we were at the starting line, and it was another windy day. We're doing about 12 knots to go over the line, and right in front of me comes another Corsair, which we did what? We T-boned it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. And we put some holes in it. My boat came out just fine, but not so much the other one. Nevertheless, Lorraine, she kind of went down and flew through the companionway into the cockpit. But these are all the kinds of stories and memories that, you know, I look back at what BBYRA has done and meant to me, and they're all such great stories and great memories that you make. It's like, you know, it's not about the stuff we have, It's about the journey. And it doesn't matter if you have had one boat your entire sailing career on White Bear, or if you had 12. It's about the stories you tell, it's about the stories, and the friends you make, and the relationships you have, and doing stuff like this. So again, I appreciate you letting me just kind of slur on a little bit and have some of your time tonight. I'll stick around if you have any questions or you want to just tell some more stories. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This box is yours.
Anybody have any questions for Norm, or want to add on to that?
I'd like to add one thing. BBYRA got its name from the inspiration by F. Scott Fitzgerald's short story, Winter Dreams, about Black Bear Lake. That was the people from the Brigadoon Club decided to change the name. There was a bit of history with that. Interesting short story if you've never read it. And also, I think there's more than one outboard motor laying on the bottom of the lake.
Care to share? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.